tell you a little bit about Kennedy's background. You can see from this slide that Kennedy is one of the country's foremost experts on commercial district revitalization and Main Street. She has held leadership roles at the Charlottesville Downtown Revitalization Organization, and for 19 years, directed the National Main Street Center, the most successful economic development program in the United States, generating over $18 billion in new investments. In 2004, she and several colleagues launched the Community Land Use and Economic Group, or CLUE. A few of her accolades include 100 most influential urbanists of all time, 100 top urbanist thinkers, and Fast Company magazine's Fast 50 Champions of Innovation. She was commissioned by the Institute for Local Self-Reliance to author an article recently outlining 26 strategies for local leaders during the pandemic. As an economist, she is research data-driven, practical, trend-savvy, and for me, best of all, Kennedy Smith is creative. During Kennedy's presentation, you can add questions to the chat box, and after presentation is completed, Andrea will call on individuals to ask their questions. Please note that today you will receive a link to the 37-page written report, and this presentation will be recorded, and you will also receive a link to that. So without further ado, please, Kennedy, take it away.
Great, thank you so much, Johnette. Yeah, as Johnette said, this has been not quite the not quite the experience that we had expected it to be because of the pandemic. We paused really just to wait and see what's going to happen over the next few months with downtowns and with small businesses. How is the pandemic going to affect real estate values? How is it going to affect travel and tourism? And what does that mean for downtown Bradenton? So we took some time after the pandemic hit to examine national trends and see what was going on in other parts of the country, other parts of the world, and see how that might change some of our findings and some of our conclusions. The questions that we sought out at the beginning to answer were things like this. What does the district currently offer in terms of its business mix, its commercial mix? What does it lack? What opportunities might exist for new businesses? What new product lines, service lines, and businesses might be feasible in downtown Bradenton? What barriers stand in the way of developing a more robust retail and business mix? What commercial development tools currently exist and what tools might be needed? Is the relationship between rent levels and retail sales in balance? Meaning, can businesses afford, given their level of sales, afford the rent levels that are being asked? And finally, how do people perceive the district? How do their perceptions affect their decisions about where to dine, where to shop, where to work, where to visit, all of those things? We looked at 7 different sort of categories of data. We looked, first of all, at sales void analysis, which compares estimates of the amount of money that people who live in a given area currently spend someplace on a wide range of retail goods and services. We compare that with the sales volume that businesses within that area are currently capturing. If there's a leakage in a certain category, it means that businesses are capturing less than people are spending. And if there's a surplus, it means that businesses are capturing more than people are spending in that area. It's not a surefire way of saying that a district can support a particular group of businesses in a retail category, but it does give us some sense of where the market strengths and weaknesses might be. We also looked at demographic characteristics to see, how is the area changing? Is it becoming older, younger? People coming from farther away to move to the area, work characteristics, things like that. Business mix and business clusters that currently exist. We did interviews with I can't remember now, 14, 16 people representing a wide range of different experiences and perspectives. We did a public survey of how people perceive three sort of chunks of downtown: Old Manatee, the downtown core, and Village of the Arts. We looked at traffic counts to see how many cars and trucks are passing through and near the district every day. And we also looked at property values, rents, and retail sales levels to see if those things were in check. I'm going to go through some of these, and I'm going to do it kind of quickly because the numbers part can be boring, and you can see more of it in the written report. In the sales void analysis, the big takeaways were that, and I should mention that sort of as an anchor point for this, I used the new parking garage as sort of my pivot point, and looked within like a quarter of a mile, a half-mile radius of that parking garage. Sales within a quarter-mile radius of the new parking garage I found to be relatively weak. They were only about $39.9 million in total, and they were dominated by sales in four main categories: motor vehicle and arts dealers, health and personal care stores, miscellaneous store retailers, which includes things that don't fit into other categories like office supplies and gifts and pets, and not surprisingly, restaurants and bars. There's still considerable room for growth in the food services and drinking places store category. Downtown Bradenton is doing relatively well in that category, but it has room for growth. It's doing, there's about $0.6 million in market demand for restaurant meals being generated by the people who live within that quarter-mile radius of the downtown, but the downtown restaurants are doing about $6.8 million in revenues, or they were before the pandemic. Obviously, that's changed a bit since then. But the city as a whole is losing about $2.7 million annually in restaurant sales, and the county is losing roughly $41.9 million. So there's still room for growth there. Also found that both Bradenton and Manatee County are experiencing significant retail sales leakages in almost every store category. And again, that was pre-pandemic. And all of these leakages represent promising opportunities to develop new businesses and build new clusters of businesses downtown. The good news there is that because there is leakage, it means that a successful cluster of businesses, or even a successful individual business with the right marketing and merchandising and management, could probably succeed with sales that are in capturing sales that are currently leaving the community and going other places, including going online. Demographically, we looked at, is the population growing, and found that yes, it is. That it's grown by about 16.9% within that quarter-mile radius of the parking garage since 2010. The city's grown about 13 percentage points, and Manatee County about 23%. Median household income in the quarter-mile radius and in the city are a little bit lower than they are in the county as a whole. Net worth is a little bit lower. Household sizes in that quarter-mile radius are a little bit smaller, and the median age is a little bit larger. So basically, that means that there could be some sort of micro differences. People who live and work in that quarter-mile radius might be slightly more interested in certain kinds of things, products, and services than people who live outside. But the differences aren't very significant. Also looked at educational characteristics, looked at employment characteristics. Much of this, of course, I expect has changed since the pandemic occurred, but it'll be another couple of years before we have census data that's going to reflect that. Also looked at it in terms of sort of age cohorts to see how the people who live downtown and in the city differ from those who live in the county. And again, there are some sort of minor differences there. In terms of the business mix and business cluster, we found 205 businesses and about 2,800 workers within that quarter-mile radius. Together, they generate about $183 million in 2019 in retail sales, which makes the downtown core actually one of the city's major economic generators. There were two striking characteristics about the business composition. One is that there are simply very few retail businesses. If you look down at the retail trade line, which includes dining, there are only 29 businesses, or 14.1% of the total number of businesses. 13 of those 29 are restaurants. So without that, retail businesses are only about 7% of the area's total businesses. And the norm for a healthy downtown is usually more in the 15 to 17% range. So downtown Bradenton is significantly under retailed. Second, there are only really two significant physical clusters of businesses in the downtown, of retail businesses, the restaurant cluster on Old Main and the small cluster of young businesses on 13th Street. There's also sort of an arts-focused cluster of businesses in Village of the Arts, but not within the downtown core. Physical clusters are really important. If you think about the experience of going to a shopping mall, shopping malls intentionally group certain businesses together because they have an affinity for one another. They generate similar kinds of customers. They offer compatible type merchants, and all the businesses in the cluster do better because of their presence there than they would if they were located sort of scattered throughout the shopping mall. They really benefit from that symbiotic relationship. So physical clusters are really, really significant. Businesses that are part of a cluster of symbiotic businesses almost always have higher sales than those that aren't. So those physical clusters are important. And that's one of the challenges that Downtown Bradenton has, is that it's a little bit physically chopped up. We also conducted interviews, again, with people representing a broad range of interests: municipal officials, business owners, realtors, civic organizations, financial institutions, lots of different people. And the major sort of threads that emerged from those were these. The first is that there's a great need for an entity whose primary focus is to actively guide downtown business development. No one entity is really charged with that responsibility right now, and so the efforts can be a little bit scattered and uneven. I also heard that there's a strong desire to improve downtown Bradenton's retail mix, particularly by adding more non-restaurant businesses. I heard that there are mixed opinions about how business friendly the city is. I heard that the arts, performing, visual, culinary, are really transforming downtown Bradenton and making it a noteworthy place. And there's a lot of energy and belief behind the thought that it can serve as a springboard for new business development and for differentiating downtown Bradenton and Bradenton itself from other communities in the region. We did a public survey to see how people perceived the three sort of sub-districts downtown. And we then took their responses. We asked them to tell us the first three words that come to mind when they think about the downtown core, Village of the Arts, and Old Manatee, and on a 1 to 3 scale. And then we coded these. So if somebody said traffic, gridlock, boring for their 3 words, we assigned that a 1, the lowest score. If they had sort of a mix, growing, rundown, potential, something like that, we gave it a 2. And if they were completely positive, saying things like exciting, innovative, and fun, we gave them a 3. This is how they ended up scoring as sort of overall perceptions. The downtown core, 2.31, Village of the Arts, 2.35, and Old Manatee, 2.02. So, you know, the downtown core, Village of the Arts, people have a pretty good perception, certainly better than middle of the road, but there's a lot of room for growth there. And Old Manatee, there were people who weren't even aware of what it was. Some of the comments people said, these are representative samples. The downtown core would be better if, and we let them fill in the blank. And we heard things like, there were more places for young people to go that aren't bars. There was greater variety of shopping, more food options, more retail space, and more than just one main street. More people live downtown. There was more variety of things to do, movie theaters, shops, music, we need music. Village of the Arts, people said would be better if it felt more like a physical extension of downtown, if the hours were more consistent, and it was at least a weekend destination, consistency in posting store hours, a desperate need for parking without walking miles, and better street lighting. People, it's too dark at night. We heard those things over and over in the survey. And finally, for Old Manatee, people said, again, if it could be more directly connected to the Riverwalk and downtown area, if it were revitalized and given a sense of place that felt coordinated with Village of the Arts and the downtown core. Some of the older buildings were tidied up and it was more friendly to pedestrians, better signage. And we heard from several people things like, I honestly didn't know anything was there. I've driven past there, but have never gone. Traffic counts. We looked at, again, within sort of a half-mile radius of the parking garage. So the distances are all from the parking garage. And this is where the state has done traffic counts in recent years at these streets and closest cross streets. And so, you know, there's about 26,000 people who pass through the downtown area every day, which is, you know, a pretty healthy group of people that could be potential shoppers if they knew that there was something to stop and do while they're there. Looking at property values, rents, and retail sales levels. I don't have a lot to say about that except 2 points. One is that we found that it's beginning to get a little bit challenging for businesses, for new businesses to afford the rents that are being asked. We also found that land value is, or at least was before the pandemic, accelerating faster than the value of improvements, which might suggest that there's a need for building rehabilitation and opportunities for new downtown development. There we go, I've got it spelled out there. So that's sort of the research that we did. Again, I think that many of these things might change slightly because of the pandemic. We're learning, that people are shopping in different ways as a result of that. We're learning that people are probably not going to be returning to offices in the numbers and frequency that they did before the pandemic. So those are things to sort of keep in mind as we go forth and look at the recommendations in the future. Some of the observations that I've taken away from the market research, first of all, is that there's enormous potential to strengthen Downtown Bradenton's retail base. I saw that both in looking at the numbers, at the sales leakages that the community is experiencing, and also looking at public sentiment. There just seems to be an extreme desire to have more retail downtown. And with 7% roughly of the business uses downtown being retail uses, I know that downtown is very under-retailed. Downtown Bradenton's resident population differs significantly from those of the overall city and county. Again, it's older, smaller households, so there are some differences there. Downtown Bradenton is physically disjointed. This is one thing that came up, I don't know how many times in my interviews and in the surveys, is that there's just a sense that some buildings have been demolished over the years. There's some big gaps in the streetscape that make it hard for people to understand, should I go here, should I go there? There's a sense that Village of the Arts and Old Manatee are physically disconnected from downtown Bradenton. This kept coming up time and time and time again. And from a retailing perspective, from a development of a tighter retail core, it's a real challenge because you want those clusters of businesses to feel physically connected to one another in order for them to succeed. The district lacks a dedicated, robust business development program. I mentioned that earlier, that was one of the things that came up in the interviews. There really needs to be some entity that, or some part of an entity that is focusing on this full time. And the district needs a bigger arsenal of business development tools and incentives, things that it can use to guide, cultivate, encourage retail and business development in the downtown and support it as it comes in. I wanted to pause for a second and talk about what COVID-19's impact might be on retail and on downtowns. From what I've seen, observing this over the past, 9-10 months now. First of all, business churn will and already is accelerating with businesses failing at a higher rate than they have failed since the 1920s. But at the same time, the number of new business startups is accelerating more than it has since 2009. So we're seeing both business failures and also business launches. Some of the business launches are business owners, entrepreneurs who are relaunching themselves after closing a business that couldn't survive the pandemic, or even filing for bankruptcy and then reorganizing. But many of them are people who are out of work because of the pandemic and are launching their own businesses to keep food on the table. And there are some pretty innovative businesses that are emerging from the pandemic as well, which is kind of exciting to see. Second, there's been a huge, huge groundswell of support for locally owned businesses throughout the country. And that really bodes well, I think, for the future. I think that we're going to see, well, certainly some businesses, some national chains and big box stores have benefited enormously from the pandemic. I think that once more small businesses are fully open and functional again, we're going to see a big swing in their direction. Some of the inequities in small business development processes are more apparent now. This was particularly apparent with the rollout of the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Improvement Disaster Loan Program, where African Americans, Latinos, who didn't have as close a relationship with traditional lenders as many white-owned businesses, really were shut out of the process and were hard hit by that. Lots of attention is now being paid to making sure that as we go forward after this sort of pause in economic activity, that we're doing so in a more equitable way and really encouraging minority business development. Omni-channel retailing is becoming the norm. I can't tell you how many years I've been encouraging small businesses, downtown businesses, to develop websites and offer things like curbside pickup. And, you know, some did, some didn't. But by April, everybody was suddenly offering, curbside pickup, buy online and pick up in store. This has really accelerated the shift online, and the numbers are pretty dramatic of how quickly the sales have shifted online. Last year, retail sales online accounted for about 9% of all retail sales in the country. By the first month after the pandemic, they were up to 15%, and it's continued to climb. We're probably going to stabilize at around 22% annually for 2020 when numbers are out. So a lot of sales have really shifted online, and it's really important that small businesses be part of that trajectory. Commercial rents are likely to remain soft for several years as people gradually return to working in offices full time. Many businesses have found during the pandemic that they don't really need their office workers and even their retail workers necessarily to be in the shop or in the office full time. That working from home actually has its benefits and is making it possible for businesses to downsize their physical footprint. Young entrepreneurial talent is going to be absolutely crucial to economic recovery. This is a digitally native generation that understands omnichannel retailing intuitively. And those are the businesses that are going to be strongest and most successful in the years ahead. They're nimble, they fast on their feet, and getting young entrepreneurs into downtown Bradenton will, as in every community in the country, is going to be very, very important. So our major recommendations. We had made some tentative recommendations before the pandemic, came back, readdressed those after the pandemic to make sure that we were still they still had viability. Made some slight changes, but basically these are the major things that we think can strengthen retail and business composition in general in downtown Bradenton in a way that is also consistent with downtown Bradenton's kind of arts vibe. The first is to focus on two key market development strategies, really put a lot of energy into these two strategies. The first is to make downtown Bradenton a great neighborhood. When people who live in a downtown district love the district, it attracts attention and makes the overall district stronger. Nothing is more attractive to visitors, including people who live within the region, than a district whose residents love its businesses, love its events, love its history, love its traditions, love its public spaces, love its personality. So thinking about making downtown Bradenton a place where people are going to want to live and hang out is strategy number one. Strategy number two is to make downtown Bradenton a regional destination for creative industries. It already has, obviously, quite a few creative businesses there, but it can certainly support more. I'm thinking about businesses that are like small maker businesses, small manufacturers, businesses that restaurants that in addition to offering table service and carry out might also make their own special sauce or preserves or jams or something and sell them through other distribution channels. And there are lots of examples of these that I gave when I visited Bradenton 2 Novembers ago now, and also when I did my sort of interim presentation. Things like White Star Manufacturing, a company in Texas that was a full service tailor years ago. And then when that factory collapsed in Bangladesh, they realized that the two owners of this business that probably because of that, US clothing manufacturers are going to be looking for opportunities to manufacture their clothing in the US again, rather than relying on overseas manufacturers. So they partnered with a community college, taught people how to basically do commercial sewing, clothing manufacturing, and won a couple of major contracts pretty quickly, bringing that manufacturing function back. I've used the example before of this guy named William Reese, who makes concert harps and Celtic harps from a storefront in downtown Rising Sun, Indiana. His business is completely location neutral. His customers all over the world, they find him online. But he wanted to be in Rising Sun because he liked the personality of the community. He liked the feel. And it's a wonderful business downtown because you walk down the sidewalk and you hear harp music kind of radiating down the street. And you can look in the storefront and see him making harps. And he invites you in and shows you how he does it. So I'm thinking of businesses that are sort of like that, creative industries that are fun for visitors to see and experience, but that also, reach out to a sort of a national and global market, and make the economy of the downtown stronger. Second strategy is to develop a small area plan for downtown Bradenton that reconnects the district and encourages movement. That theme of the different parts of the district being disconnected from one another came through in all of our research in every single piece. The Riverwalk is an excellent example of new development that resulted from a visionary planning initiative. And I think it's time to now make a similarly visionary planning initiative supported by and coordinated by a wide range of stakeholders in the communities to repair some of the gaps and voids in the urban fabric, the streetscapes in the downtown, and to enliven the built environment even more, and to build those stronger connections between the three different subsets of the district. And there are some tools that you could use to do that, like a flexible tax increment financing fund that could be used to fill gaps in financing for certain types of new development or to acquire parcels, cover some cost of public improvements. Vacant property ordinance might help ensure that buildings are fully utilized and to help ensure that vacant buildings are safe and secure. And maybe a community-based equity investment fund to provide equity for infill and rehab projects that are high priorities for the community. Third is to use the small parking garage storefronts as an active incubator for high priority retail businesses. I've actually talked about this quite a bit with downtown, with Realize Bradenton and some of its partners over the past 6 months or so, even going back to a year. The reason that I've recommended this is because they are contiguous storefronts. They're next to each other, and there are not many places in downtown Bradenton where you have several vacant storefronts that are connected to each other in a high visibility sort of 100% corner location. And the city has the ability to control the rent, which makes them ideal for an incubator. I did a couple of scenario planning. My thought was that if these businesses, if these storefronts could be used as incubators for new retail businesses and potentially service businesses who would locate there for a year and then spin off into a new freestanding storefront in the downtown, with time to find that storefront over the course of a year, that basically you're creating 5 new businesses every year over a period of time. So scenario 1, I looked at was just renting the 5 storefronts at market rate to any business that wants to take them for potentially a 5 or 10-year lease, and what that might generate. And then second is to use those 5 storefronts as a business incubator, with 5 businesses spinning out of that incubator every year into new spaces. What I found was that in scenario 1, in rental income, I looked at rental income, retail sales, property tax, state sales tax, county sales tax, and wages, and found that scenario 1 would have an impact, a direct impact. I wasn't looking at indirect or induced impacts, of about $8.8 million over the course of 10 years, whereas scenario 2 would generate $56.8 million. Obviously higher because of the multiplier of spinning out new businesses over the course of those years. It can certainly be done without using those 5 storefronts. The 5 storefronts simply have some tremendous benefits for use as incubators because of their contiguity, their high visibility, and the fact that they're city owned, and therefore the rent can be subsidized. In these 2 scenarios, and you'll see great more detail of them in the written report, I was assuming that in scenario 1 that the rent would be $16 a square foot, and in scenario 2 that it would only be $4 a square foot, making it more affordable for young entrepreneurs to get in there and get established. But the economic impact is still profoundly bigger in scenario 2, even with the subsidy. Another thing I think is very important is to activate storefront windows and street level facades throughout the district to encourage movement throughout the district. Since you have those physical gaps, activating the streetscape can help do that. And there's some places like this where obviously you're already doing pieces of that, but even bringing it onto the buildings and into the storefronts, I think can make a big difference. Here's some examples. This is an example of an optometrist shop who's put these big blinkies in the window, which really catch your eye, no pun intended, as you walk by. This is an example I think I showed when I was there before. This is actually it's a storefront window that advertises this men's clothing brand. What they did was they have a screed inside the storefront window, just like you'd have in a theater set. And they had this guy film these acrobatics against a green screen. And there's a little heat sensor on the outside of the storefront window. So when somebody walks by, the heat sensor picks up on the person and it activates this DVD loop with an LCD projector shining in there. Some people notice it, some people don't. I've seen the same technique used to advertise things like ballet seasons, for all kinds of things. It's relatively simple to do. And it's a great use for vacant storefront spaces because obviously it draws your attention to the window. Here's the guy filming against the green screen. Here's another example of that. This is a storefront window advertising scarves. And they have these two video screens where they have videoed a woman blowing. And when it's timed to when she's blowing, there's a little tiny fan that's hidden just behind the screen that blows the scarf in the air. Simple things to do that create motion, bring those windows to life, and encourage people to move through the district. Here's another example. This is from downtown Nashville, where they've wrapped their traffic switching boxes with vinyl pictures of recordings from film. And on the back sides of them, they had this little very focused directional speaker. So as you walk by, you hear this little blast of music from the person who's featured on that box, giving you sort of this aural sensation as you go through. Here's another example. This is a water sensitive paint on the side of a building. When it rains, the picture just pops out at you. Again, simple light touch things that can help bring the district alive. And Realize Bradenton has done a lot of great work in this area, obviously, with its murals and its activities and events. But I think we need to do more with the buildings themselves to pull those pieces of the district together. Not surprisingly, I'm recommending that you create an entity or a function within an existing entity that's dedicated to downtown business development. Shopping malls have full-time facilities management staff, full-time marketing staff, and full-time business development staff, businesses who, entities that go out and actively look for new businesses and help work with the existing businesses there to help them survive. Downtowns need exactly the same thing. Downtowns need full-time management entities to pull these pieces together. And I really think that Bradenton needs this for its downtown. Reactivating the municipal auditorium as a performance space. Downtown Bradenton could use an informal performance and gathering space. The city owns one, it's right on the water. So by combining this opportunity with the planned activation of the space between the city hall and the new garage, the city could help make downtown Bradenton a regional destination in entertainment. Those are my major recommendations. I'd like to stop now and take questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Kennedy. At the moment, I don't see any questions in the chat, although Matt from the State College of Florida Incubator did mention that he really likes that idea. So
Super.
Is there anyone who would like to come on with turn on your microphone and ask any questions of Kennedy? Yeah, Ben.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Kennedy, great presentation so far. I can't help but think with the tremendous appetite for more retail as kind of given as practically a mandate through this. We're kind of discussing 5 small 1,000 square foot spaces. Were you informed early on in your search that the other older parking garage that the city of Bradenton has that's located on 12th and 8th was originally designed on the first floor level to also be built out for further retail spaces, which could also very literally and physically help connect the Village of the Arts for more retail spaces as well. And was that brought into consideration as well to help spur that retail environment?
Yeah, I was aware of it. I mean, I think that this can happen almost anywhere. I think that the important thing is that I'm trying to stress is that by having a formal incubation program where you're subsidizing rent for a year to get businesses established, and the businesses be near each other so that they're a cluster that people are going to want to go visit as a whole, that you can really sort of fast track and stimulate business development. it could happen in any number of places within the downtown where you have some contiguity. It could be a larger storefront space that's divided up into smaller spaces, but there are lots of possibilities there.
Kennedy, this is Janet. Am I unmuted? I can't tell. Okay.
You are.
Can you talk a little bit more about the difference between an incubator and an accelerator?
Sure. And it could be an accelerator too, but an incubator is a place, a situation. It doesn't have to be a physical place, but it could be a, an online thing, I suppose, where entrepreneurs' ideas are literally incubated. They have access to training and guidance, a physical environment where they can share office equipment and supplies and kind of grow within that. An accelerator is sort of an incubator with an injection of equity to spur things along, and maybe stronger expectations of performance. So lots of the accelerators that are popping up around the country now operate this way, where you are accepted, you apply to be part of an accelerator program. It's a competitive process. Sort of the best business ideas that are chosen are accepted into a training program that goes on for, 3 months, 6 months, some period of time. And you're supported financially during that process by equity investors who invest in exchange for percentage ownership of the business. Typically, I see it running between 5 and 7% an equity share. And they are then given lots of intensive coaching during that period of time from people who have expertise in marketing, merchandising, management, online, omni-channel sales, everything that you would need to succeed. An accelerator would be a fabulous, fabulous thing for downtown Bradenton. Accelerators are usually tend towards tech businesses, but I'm seeing that changing very, very rapidly, in part accelerated, no pun intended, by the pandemic, where people are realizing that there is a need to, because we've lost so many retail businesses and lost so many restaurants, there's a need to really help fast track getting those businesses restarted. And changing too. They're going to be better businesses that we see emerging from the pandemic because they're starting with the expectation that they're going to have to be omni-channel and they're going to have to perform and work in different ways.
All right, thank you. Carrie, did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
Hi, yes. Kennedy, thank you for such a great presentation and everybody involved. I have a question kind of about hours and just if you have any insight. I know some, like, just as an example, one of the new storefronts, relatively new, is a bridal shop, and they have a beautiful window. They've, occupied a store that's between the Village of the Arts and the river, but they're open by appointments. And we have other stores, like a record store that is open in the evenings from 5 to 8. I mean, there's, with the omni-channel and smaller entrepreneurs, is there a movement away from like all businesses need to be open from 9 to 5, or like if I was in a retail business downtown, I may do something like it makes more sense to be open noon to 9 or something because there's more activity, more people around downtown in the evening sometimes. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about businesses being open and how you deal with so many different things like that.
Yeah, it's the answer, again, like many things, was a little different before the pandemic than after. But one thing that always comes to my mind is a guy in Iowa who had a title insurance company once told me that a business that's open from 9 to 5 is catering to the unemployed because everybody's off at work, and so who can shop there then? But again, because omnichannel is going to be such an enormous thing driving the market going forward, I think it's going to be possible for businesses to operate with slightly different hours than before and be successful, because somebody could be able to buy something from that record store at 2 in the morning if they chose to online, and then pick it up the next day or have it delivered. So I think it is changing a bit. Also, I think that we sort of have the expectation culturally that, and I think it's from the shopping mall industry, that businesses should be open certain hours, certain standard hours. But downtowns are not shopping malls. Shopping malls are almost completely apparel focused. They sell one kind of thing and things that are related to that. Downtowns have, this isn't true of Bradenton, but downtowns generally might have something like, a feed and grain store that should be open from 5 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, because that's when its customers come there. And then restaurants open from lunchtime through, late evening, because that's when their customers come there. A greater variety of uses, and therefore you kind of have to tailor the hours appropriately. Again, that's why business clustering can be so important. If you have clusters of businesses that operate at the same hours or the same general hours in the same location, it makes the downtown function a little bit better, and all those businesses do better individually because of it. So I think we're going to see changes because of the incredible growth of omnichannel. I think it's going to be a little bit different, but yeah, I think we need to think of flexibility in store hours always, omnichannel boosting sales of limited store hours, and clustering businesses together that have similar store hours and similar kinds of customers.
Great. And I am balancing some hand raises and the chat here, so I am going to get to everyone, but I did want to call on Jane. She's been raising her hand for a little bit.
Hi, I think this is a marvelous presentation and exciting for all of us to think about the potential. But in terms of the practical, could you elaborate a little more about your vision for the business development program? You've clearly identified 3 different districts. And are you envisioning one manager for each of these districts? And would this be financed through a business development district program singularly? And lastly, you haven't talked about transportation. Are you envisioning that there could be some kind of supplemental steps taken, whether trolleys or pedestrian, that would enable the connection that you spoke about?
So those are 2 big questions. So for the first one, in terms of management, I have thoughts about how it might be organized, but I think at this point, I want to put it forth to the community for the community to then discuss and figure out which organization or organizations have greatest capacity for this, are sort of positioned best, have the best sort of reputation as being a well-run entity. I've seen downtown management programs that succeed being private sector nonprofits. I've seen some succeed that are located within city government. I've seen lots of different variations, some that are business improvement districts themselves, some that aren't, that are funded by city appropriations and private contributions. I've seen everything. And what I've learned is that any sort of entity can succeed, but it has to really have the sort of philosophical and financial support of the community. So I think that's something for Realize Bradenton and the city and the chamber and all the other organizations that are sort of involved in this to sort of hash out now at this point. The point I want to make is that I think it's really crucial that this stuff is not going to happen unless you've got somebody who's really watching it 24/7 and paying attention to it and putting the energy into it. I think it would be a big leap to have separate managers for each of the 3 districts, but I think each district needs its own marketing plan and needs to sort of have its own coordinated focus. But that can then be managed by, I think, one management entity. In terms of transportation, the only thing that I really thought about in terms of transportation during this engagement was that I find the one-way streets a problem. I think that the one-way streets in the district move cars too quickly, and that is always detrimental to encouraging people to browse and notice what you're offering, what you have to offer. So I think that's a problem. I've seen across the country since the pandemic that transportation patterns are changing. More people are walking and biking than they were a year ago. And I think that that's something to keep in mind as you're rethinking transportation patterns and needs downtown. But I think it might, again, be something to keep an eye on for the next year or so, and then come to some conclusions when we're a little bit farther down the road out of the pandemic.
I'm going to jump back to the chat, and then our Councilwoman Jane Coker has been asking. So I'm going to go to Lisa DeFranza real quick with her question, and then we'll jump back to our Councilwoman.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much for this presentation. It's great.
Sure, thanks.
I'm just wondering if you have data on, in a thriving city, what's the mix of creative nonprofit businesses and organizations. I'm thinking particularly of arts organizations performing visual and media.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any hard data that anybody has on that, but my informal observation, and actually I have, well, it's not data, but I have an experience I can relate to you, is that when you have creative nonprofits, you have a lot of creative energy that goes into business development too. The one little sort of discovery I would mention is that I was working on a project for a historic preservation organization in Montana a few years ago, and kind of discovered by fluke that they had a huge concentration of artists in this place that by coincidence also had the highest per capita number of patents filed in the country. And that just struck me as kind of odd that there were all these sort of scientific inventions happening there in this thriving arts community. And so I talked to some people at the US Patent and Trade Association to see, is this a thing? And they were like, we've never documented it. Yeah, it seems to be that where you've got a lot of arts related organizations, you've got a lot of creative energy going into sciences and technology at the same time. So for what it's worth, I would put that out there that, yeah, creativity in arts fosters creativity in science and business.
All right, great. Councilwoman, do you have a question for Kennedy?
You're muted. Great.
Hi. Thank you so much for all this information. I've been taking notes like mad. But one of the things that you brought up was about I don't know if it was opportunity or the need for building rehab. And have you said there is any incentives, or you said you made some mention about an investment fund that some places that has been successful?
Yeah, so the thing that the reason I made the point is that in looking at the fact that land values, when you look at, you know, sort of the tax valuation of a building in downtown Bradenton, there's the land component and the improvement component. The land value is accelerating greater than the building value is. So I think that could mean that you have some buildings that need rehab. One of the best tools, of course, are the federal and historic rehabilitation tax credits. And those can work for individual property owners. They can be syndicated if the property owner doesn't need or can't use the tax credit themselves. For instance, if it were a building owned by a nonprofit or by a local government, they could still use the tax credits and transfer the credits onto an investor who would invest cash in the project instead. And that's really that's driven most of the historic rehabilitation activity in the US for the past 30 or 40 years, and is really, really worth learning more about and getting a handle on. But there are other things that communities can do too. There's a crowdfunding organization company that started in DC a few years ago called Fundrise, Fundrise, which focused initially on sort of, you know, small commercial buildings, you know, 2-3 story commercial buildings like you've got in abundance in downtown. And they would pay the buildings, and then people in the neighborhood who live there might invest $500 or so and get a share of ownership of that building. And they've been enormously successful and are working all over the country now in putting together projects like that, where the community itself has an ownership share in buildings. So there's a huge range of things that communities can do. Some communities abate property taxes for a certain period of time to encourage property owners to make improvements. There are facade incentive grants that communities offer, lots of possibilities, even some that have been funded during the pandemic with CARES Act money. So,
but could you say a couple that stand out in your mind that we might be able to look at?
Communities are programs.
Communities.
Gosh, let me.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. If not, it's just
no,
one of the things that we've talked about.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some that are sort of that share some things in common with Bradenton in terms of population size or sort of personality. I would say Thomasville, Georgia is a place not too far away that you could take a look at that has done a great job with stimulating building development over the past probably 30 or 40 years. They've been very active. Let me see what else might be a good example near issue. In Florida, I think DeLand has done a pretty good job Let me see, what else? Let me think of a few places, and I'll shoot those to Jeanette to pass on to you, but I want to find places that are similar in size so that it's realistic. I mean, I could mention Pittsburgh, but that would,
Yeah,
that's not as,
thank you.
not as relatable. Sure.
Great, thank you.
Great. So we are getting questions from lots of different ways right now. I just want you all to know I am watching and I will get to all of you as I am able. But our next question is from our chamber president, Jackie Dozeski. Are you on? Would you like to ask your question?
I am, Andrea, but I think Jane's question led us to what I was seeking, which were some examples that are along the scales of Bradenton's potential. So I look forward to hearing what those results might be.
Great, wonderful.
Sure.
And we have a question from someone. I'm not sure what your name is. Your screen name is VCRISCI. Would you like?
Yes, Vincent Crucci.
Yes, would you like to ask your questions, Vincent?
I have a couple of properties downtown, and the biggest concern I have is the homeless issue at 530 and 540 13th Street West. We continue to have homeless people living behind the building, leaving trash, literally leaving excrement. And the tenants have voiced complaints about this for maybe 2 years. There's only so much we can do, and we can't move the homeless. And that shouldn't merely be our problem. It should be a city problem. And I'm not sure how to deal with that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that underscores the need, I think, for a downtown management entity, because that's the kind of thing that downtown management entities are often the spearhead for dealing with. They become the entity that then talks to the city about having, better enforcement, talks to nonprofits about having a center where homeless people can go and get services, tying them into the social service network. You need someone who's really focusing on the downtown in its totality, and figuring out all these different issues and solutions to them. Right now, I think it's one of those issues that probably is just there and there's no one entity charged with managing it. And there needs to be.
I don't see that a committee is needed or a department is needed. We need the police department to evict these people frequently. And it doesn't seem that they're taking a strong role in evicting the people unless there's someone physically there to complain about them. And usually it's late at night and it's dark and there's no one physically there to complain about it.
Yeah, well, homelessness is a complicated issue that is, certainly moving people so that they are not a nuisance or a deterrent to downtown commerce is important, but they have needs that need to be met too. And so it has to be part of that whole fabric of a support system.
Mayor Brown, did you want to chime in on that at all?
Yeah, I wanted to start out first by thanking Kennedy Smith and Realize Bradenton for really bringing this up and going forward with it. As we can see, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of close to, I think, 80 people interested and really care about our downtown. So that's very important. And I think it's something that I stressed at our workshop the other day, that as many council people watch it today or can go back and watch it, because it's going to give a perspective maybe that they didn't think about at a certain way, and an opportunity that we can actually to grow downtown. I really appreciate the comments about how we may seem a little disjointed, because we do have some great amenities in different places, but it's how we connect them together, I think, is going to be what's going to bring the public in the future and to continue to grow. I think it gives us an opportunity to also show a new council that where some good things can happen. And I think that's very important. And then to talk to Mr. Christie's point of some things that are happening. Obviously, the police department does care and is working as aggressively and legally as possible with what we can do. There's a lot of issues out there that we're dealing with, and it's something in my administration that we can't do it all in one day, but we're working through some of those issues. And obviously my office is open. Mr. Christie, if you want to call me at any time, we can talk about some of it and we can address them, because that area has been addressed a little bit, but it's going to make our downtown, if we don't address some of these things, harder to I think show the public that we're out there trying to grow it. But great job, and appreciate you, Mrs. Smith, going through things, as well as Realize Bradenton continuing the conversation. Obviously, the pandemic has slowed us a little bit, but we're very excited in the city. I think our residents are excited, and I know this council is excited to see what's next for the city of Bradenton. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor Brown. I know we are running close on time here, Kennedy. We do have a few more questions. Are you able to stay on and answer a few more questions for us?
Sure, of course.
Wonderful. All right, Susie Bowie, the president of our Manatee Community Foundation, you've had a question in the chat. Would you like to ask?
She already answered my question, but thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your work and research. And my question was about the one-way streets and whether or not they impact business. And you addressed that after I asked the question. I do have kind of a follow-up. And what would you recommend, Kennedy, for prioritizing some of the wonderful ideas that you've shared with us based on the size of our city and what could be possible? What kind of process would you recommend?
Well, you may notice that I had like 6 recommendations and not 30. And the reason was that these really are the priorities. I think they're all important. I think having a downtown management entity is crucial because you need some entity that's going to implement this and move it along or be sort of the coordinator of doing it. No one entity can do it all, but you need someone who's orchestrating it. So that's important. I think that the working on the connections between the 3 different chunks of the district are really important. Animating the streetscape is very important. I don't know. I mean, they're all important. So they're all important. I think that the possibility of having the contiguous storefronts as an incubator is a unique opportunity that you rarely see. And so I'd kind of like to see the city capitalize on that because the opportunity is not one you can easily create. And you have it. But yeah, no, I think probably getting the downtown management entity together is probably the first step because then you have, more of a resource, sort of an army to begin to mobilize on these things.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Susie.
Thank you.
Ashley, you've had a few questions. Do you want to chime in with your thoughts? Are you still here, Ashley?
Oh, you really caught me off guard.
Sorry. Hi.
I have my headphones on and everything. I was just in the bathroom. I'm super curious. How do you see mobile businesses? We do have a new food truck park in downtown, I think about a mile east of downtown here. How do you see mobile food businesses or other mobile businesses fitting in to our downtown core, or even specifically right in downtown there? Or possibly like having, I don't know, like a creative relationship with the brick and mortar businesses, because I know there's a lot of pushback often with brick and mortars when you bring in mobile businesses. So I was curious to see what your thoughts were, if you knew anything on that specifically.
Yeah, it's great question. And making it sort of be a generic mobile business is a good way to frame it too, because of the pandemic, I have seen so many businesses become mobile, like brick and mortar businesses. Suddenly, I saw a woman who had like an 18-foot long truck that she turned into like this mobile clothing store with a changing room and everything that she would just drive to your house and, personalized shopping. I've seen food deliverers who are also partnering with their local library and delivering library books around town. So there's just a lot of energy going into thinking about what role mobile might play going forward in a post-pandemic world, at least for the next like 5 or 6 years. Yeah, I think it's whereas a year ago before the pandemic, I did feel some of the friction between like food trucks and downtown restaurants. And some competitive juice. I think now it's different. I think it's a new playing field now. I think it's really important to figure out how mobile plays into a downtown business development strategy. It can be an incubation strategy, in fact, to get mobile involved. So I think it's worth putting some energy into thinking about that. There's also there's a mungy kind of area of mobile. I'm seeing a lot of downtowns around the country putting together their own co-op delivery services to help brick and mortar businesses get products to their customers who are afraid to come into the store physically. You know, it's even faster than Amazon can deliver if you can do it that way. Iowa City, Iowa has a great program called, I think it's called Downtown Dash or something like that. That is in fact doing that. It started out being owned by 17 restaurants who want to get together and deliver food themselves, but now it has other retailers involved in it also. And they have a fleet of 3 or 4 cars that just go around and do deliveries in town all day long of everything downtown. It's really cool.
All right, I did just want to mention that in the chat, a couple of people have mentioned some examples of locations who have done a great job with this. Winter Haven has been mentioned and downtown Dunedin. So to look at. Jeanette, I know you've got a question. Would you like to ask your question now?
Hey, Kennedy, what do you see as the role of farmers markets in continuing downtown revitalization and business development?
Well, of course, it's, you know, they're great. If communities don't have farmers markets, I always encourage them to create one because they bring activity, vibrancy to the district, and they also provide so many entrepreneurial opportunities for food producers. They're fabulous. I can't speak highly enough of them. And many communities sort of, you know, gravitate towards, they start with farmers markets that are held in parking lots and public parks and things like that, and gravitate in some places to, like, you know, covered open air structures that can operate full time in all kinds of weather. So they're great. They're great economic generators and they're great people generators. And they're also great for some of those like gaps in the storefronts where you've got a space, vacant lots. Great to fill them up with temporary activities like that.
And what about pop-up markets?
Pop-up markets, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're, I mean, in a sense, farmers markets are pop-up markets. So I think the pop-up you're talking about is probably smaller. But yeah, great uses, great temporary uses, great ways for business owners to test new products or sell products that aren't moving in their stores. Great way for new entrepreneurs to try out the market and get to know customers. They're great. They have many purposes.
All right.
I saw this great pop-up market once where this guy had self-published his own book. It was some fiction book about Martians, and he like ordered like 2,000 copies of it and could not get a bookstore to buy them. So he set up a pop-up in a park one day, and he had organized it like the inside of a bookstore where this section was, you know, science, and this section was cooking, and this section was home decor, and they were all the same book. It was all the same book in all the sections, but it was a riot and people loved it, and he sold all 2,000 of his books in a pop-up park one day.
That's great. Okay, and Bill Webster had asked about a bicycle shop, but it looks like that has been answered in the chat because we do have a new shop coming to 13th Street West. So that's exciting.
Cool.
Bill, did you have any other questions about that? All right, I think he's good. Ben, it looks like you've got another question. Would you like to ask Kennedy your last question?
Sure. I'll just read it off because it's probably best. Kennedy, in your opinion, what is the best way to spur regrowth and revitalization on the 9th Street corridor? The rezone has helped remove unwanted businesses, but there's no, or at least well-known program in place to help replace them with new, different, and exciting uses. I can't help but think that the Pittsburgh Pirates organization would want to see this area blossom as well.
Yeah, well, you know, I think that would be a big reach for a new downtown management entity, but I think that a new downtown management entity could be a good template for the community to think about how to develop business along particular corridors that are important. And I think sort of the same approach is needed, that you need to sort of figure out what can the micro area support, what visibility does the corridor get, and who are the people who travel there, and what are the unique uses that you could put there that would complement what you offer in other districts in the community. So I would say start with the downtown management entity and then see if that is a good model for then taking on the 9th Street corridor or any other parts of the community that need help commercially.
And I have a question from someone who is not able to, she's not in a spot where she can come on and ask herself, but she did want me to ask, she is starting a new magazine in Bradenton, Bradenton Magazine. And she thinks there's a need for a platform for local businesses to advertise and tell their story. So how do you think advertisement and organizations that help and assist people advertise and tell their story are, how are they in this, seen in this development?
Well, the method of transmitting the story could vary. It could be a magazine, it could be, you know, a webinar, it could be a podcast, it could be whatever it might be. The stories are the really important part. You know, the story of McDonald's or the Gap or Burger King is just one story. It is the same thing no matter where you go. You could be at a McDonald's in Bradenton or a McDonald's in Sacramento, and you wouldn't know the difference. It's one thing. Independently owned businesses, locally owned businesses have amazing stories. They're unique, one-of-a-kind places. And to the extent that you can get those stories out there so that the public knows about them, the stronger the businesses are going to be, because people are drawn to that kind of energy and spirit. So I love the idea of telling business stories, whether it's in a magazine or it's advertising, or whether it's something that's done as a public service, whatever. Just getting the stories out is really crucial and really fun, really fun.
Okay, and let's see, I've got, oh, Matt, would you like to come up and talk a little bit? We've got Matt from the State College of Florida Incubator. I know this is right up your alley. Do you want to talk about a little bit about this example and maybe a little bit about what you do?
Sure, thanks. Thanks for giving me a few seconds. I don't want to take too much time, but as I put in chat, San Diego Downtown Partnership is, I think, a great example of what Kennedy's talking about as just a single private, public-private organization that handles kind of the downtown development and issues, whether that comes to homelessness, whether that comes to just cleaning, whether that comes to economic development. So that's a good model, and I think that's kind of exactly what Kennedy's talking about. Regarding the incubator here, we're at State College, Florida, and you know, let us help with the with the new businesses. I know there are some other organizations here. I see some of the other kind of entrepreneur support organizations also on the call, but you know, there's a tremendous kind of community support here for those new businesses, and you know, as we come together as an organization, as a community. And then as a group, and we can probably definitely execute on many, if not most of those recommendations. So thanks, and we're here to help.
Super.
Right, we have such a great community. I also did want to add, there was a chat that came in from Jim B, who has a property just off the downtown area and is very excited to be part of that overall plan and the connectivity and flow of all of it. So we have a lot of people, as you can see, Kennedy, in this community that are excited about what you had to share today. And I think we've hit all of the questions. So Johnette, would you like to close us out?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone that is participating. And it's going to take all of us to continue the momentum in the 3 districts in downtown Bradenton. And it's going to take practicality, economics, as well as cooperation, collaboration, and creativity. So Realize Bradenton, very grateful for all of you and working with the City of Bradenton and the Manatee Chamber of Commerce. Certainly getting Kennedy Smith again as a leading economist in the US would not have been possible without the Knight Donor Advised Fund at the Manatee Community Foundation. So it does take philanthropic partners as well that have a vision for a community, and we're really grateful for that. The last thing I'll say is that last week, Realize Bradenton recently got to focus on those businesses that are most right now affected by COVID, people of color, millennials, and women. And it's a 8-week business development course. And these some of these inaugural students are on the call today, and they will be developing their skills that will result in a business development plan with finances. And we're really excited because the thing that is most important about this group of 14 entrepreneurs, of which 83% are people of color, women, and millennials, is that they are creating an ecosystem of support to each other. And they are also potentially going to be able to work with Matt at State College. They'll be a feeder into the Chamber of Commerce, future membership, and certainly with the Economic Development Council. There are so many great partners, and these are a variety of Bradenton-based entrepreneurs that are really coming together, and we're excited about the basics. So I just wanted to point that out. With other partners, we are trying to support inclusive entrepreneurship in downtown Bradenton. So with that, Andrea will be loading the PowerPoint, the print report, and we'll also want you to, we'll send a link, right, Andrea? We'll be sending a link, and we're grateful. And certainly if you have questions after this, you can direct them to Andrea or I, or Realize Bradenton. And certainly we are so grateful to Kennedy Smith for her local and national knowledge of what the opportunities are, not the problems, but the opportunities in this pandemic and the post-pandemic world. So thank you all so much. And thank you. Hey, Andrea, thank you for coordinating the questions and hosting this. So again, I guess we'll say bye-bye.